Ever feel like the words you use in a new language are shaping not just what you say, but maybe who you are when you say it?
Mm,
It's a strange feeling, right?
yeah,
But kind of fascinating.
definitely.
And that's basically the naughty relationship we're diving into today, language learning and identity.
Precisely. We've got a bunch of research here looking at just how learning a new language can really change your sense of self, how you interact with the world.
Okay.
We'll be pulling from studies on, how we form identities in our first language, our L1, but also in a second language, an L2,
Right.
and also the role of emotions, which is huge. The simple act of talking to people, interaction, and even how learners' own ideas can shape the learning process itself.
So the mission for this deep dive then
Mhm.
is to really pull out the key insights, like how do your social surroundings, your feelings, your chats with others, even the classroom setup, how does all that influence your language journey and, well, who you become in that language?
Yeah, that's the goal.
Okay, so let's kick off with this idea that language and identity,
Hmm.
they aren't these like solid things. One source talks about a post-structuralist view.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like language gives us categories, man, woman, English speaker, whatever,
Yeah.
but these aren't rigid boxes.
Right, they shift. Depends on where you are, who you're with.
Exactly.
And what's interesting is how that lines up with the sociocultural perspective, too, which also sees identity as dynamic, always changing through language.
Okay.
But it adds this layer of power dynamics. Like, think about how speaking a certain language might give you more clout or less in some situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Norton and Toohey, they put it really well. They said identity is fluid, context-dependent, and context aims producing.
Hmm.
Basically meaning it's not just who you are, but who you are right now in this place trying to do something specific.
Tied to the situation.
Totally.
And if we link that to Norton's work specifically on language learning identity, it clicks even more, I think.
How's
Well, she talks about it as understanding your relationship to the world, how that's built over time and across different places, and importantly, how you see your possibilities for the future.
okay. So it's about your place in the world
Mm.
and how learning a language shapes that view and what you believe you can actually do.
Exactly. Your potential.
Now, here's where it gets really juicy. Um, Pierce's idea of investment,
Right.
it's more than just, putting in the hours practicing. It's about how much of your actual self, your social standing, the things you hope to gain.
Yeah.
How much of that is tied up in becoming fluent?
Yeah, it's a deeper commitment. The example they use of immigrant women in Canada.
Oh, yeah, that really illustrates it.
It's not just about learning English verbs, right? It's
Yeah.
about their future, their place in a whole new society. Their investment is huge.
Which makes you wonder, does learning English, say, make someone feel less connected to their first language? Does it threaten that investment?
That's a common worry, I think. But one study Norton discusses with students in Pakistan learning English, it actually found their commitment to Urdu, which is obviously incredibly important there, wasn't weakened at all.
Really?
Yeah. It suggests you can absolutely build a new linguistic identity without, erasing the old one. It's not the zero-sum game.
That's such a great point. It kind of busts that myth, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That identity is some limited resource.
Totally.
Okay, so it's not either. Now, let's look at how different social settings can really stir things up for your identity when you're learning. We've got this story of Ming, a Chinese student.
Yes, Ming's case is really insightful.
So back in China, his strong Chinese literacy actually helped his English learning. His L1 identity felt like a positive thing in that context.
Right. But then the shift happens when he moves to the U.S. for his master's.
What happened there?
Well, even though he knew people in both the Chinese-speaking and English-speaking communities at uni, these groups just didn't really mix.
So they were quite separate.
Very separate. And it made him feel like he couldn't quite be his whole self in either group. He had to sort of, switch parts of himself on or off depending on who he was with.
That sounds really isolating.
Yeah.
Like being caught between words.
It does. And it wasn't just that feeling. There was this really upsetting incident in a supermarket.
Oh, yeah.
An American man basically told him that Chinese people don't own English and shouldn't speak it. Just outright rejected his right to use the language.
Wow. That's awful.
Yeah. And that direct rejection, that attack on his L1 identity, it actually damaged his confidence in both his Chinese self and his developing English-speaking self.
It really shows how powerful those external reactions can be, shaping how you feel inside.
Absolutely. It really drives home the point that building a multilingual identity is so incredibly personal. It's tied to your specific situation, your age, where you're learning, your life stage. There's no single blueprint.
Exactly. And Mean's story really highlights why it's so vital that we, acknowledge and respect and actually value the huge variety of these multilingual experiences. Everyone's path is unique.
Well said. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something internal that can be either a huge help or a massive roadblock. Krashen's affective filter.
Ah, yes, the affective filter. So this is about emotions, right? Like
Yeah.
motivation, confidence,
Yeah.
anxiety.
Exactly. Motivation, self-confidence, anxiety, they act like this, well, filter.
Okay, and how does that work?
Well, if you're feeling negative emotions like fear of making mistakes, anxiety, maybe even shame, the filter goes up
Right.
and it creates this kind of mental barrier. It makes it physically harder almost to absorb the new language input.
Like trying to listen to someone while you've got loud static in your ears.
That's a great analogy. And crucially, the research points out this filter isn't fixed. It's not static.
It can change.
Yeah, it fluctuates depending on the situation, how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And when the filter is low and you feel comfortable, safe, supported,
When you're more open.
much more open. You're more likely to cooperate, participate, share your ideas, take risks in the new language.
One of the sources compared it to welcoming a guest, didn't it?
It did. If you make a guest feel welcome and relaxed, they open up, they engage. It's the same idea in the classroom or any learning environment. Comfort leads to participation.
So what can teachers, or maybe even learners themselves, do to lower this filter, make it more welcoming?
Well, there are practical things like catering to learners' interests, maybe letting them have some input on discussion topics,
Makes sense.
creating a space where people feel genuinely heard, sharing some of the control, giving learners responsibility for aspects of their learning that boosts motivation and that investment we talked about.
So it's about creating that safe space to try things out.
Exactly. A safe learning environment is fundamental for building confidence and just being open to taking in new stuff.
Because the flip side, as one source mentioned, is that even things said or done unintentionally by a teacher can actually build this wall in a learner's mind.
Precisely. It can make them shut down. So fostering that supportive, low-pressure atmosphere is just vital.
Absolutely. Okay, so we need that low effective filter. What about actually using the language interaction?
Right. This brings us to Long's interaction hypothesis. The core idea is that we get the understandable language input we need, comprehensible input, often through what he called modified interaction.
Modified interaction, like when people adjust how they talk to make sure the other person gets that.
Exactly. Those little clarifications, repetitions, maybe speaking a bit slower, the back and forth adjustments we naturally make in conversation.
Okay.
And the central point here is that genuine conversation, real interaction in social settings, that's the engine driving language construction for the learner.
So it's not just passive listening.
Not at all. Loschke did an experiment showing that when learners had to actively negotiate meaning together, like really work to understand each other, it didn't just help their comprehension then, but likely helped them acquire the language too.
That collaborative effort seems key.
It is, and it contrasts quite sharply with some traditional classroom dynamics, doesn't it?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like the teacher just asks questions to check if you know the answer, not to actually, talk.
Right. Pika called it often being a one-way flow, mainly for elicitation and evaluation, not genuine communication.
So what we need are tasks that get learners really talking to each other.
Yes. Tasks that are engaging, maybe a little challenging, and importantly, require interaction. That's where you get the clarity, the flexibility, the real-time feedback Van Leer talked about.
It makes me think of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development.
Exactly. That idea that we learn by doing things with others who are maybe slightly more capable or just bring different strengths, that interaction stretches us, pushes us towards being able to do it ourselves, self-regulation.
And interestingly, the sources also bring up online communication, CMC.
Yeah, computer-mediated communication. It has real potential, apparently, to connect learners and create these interactive contexts. Well, for some learners, it might lower anxiety compared to face-to-face talk. It can give them more thinking time, maybe more control.
Okay.
And there's even this model Smith developed describing the back and forth of online negotiation. There's a trigger, someone says something, an indicator, someone signals they don't understand, a response, clarification request, a reaction, the clarification itself, evaluation, confirmation of
Yeah,
understanding.
that's quite detailed.
Yeah, and a potentially an optional exit negotiation routine, like further checks. It shows even tact-based chat can be rich with these meaning-making moments.
Fascinating. So even digital interactions can provide that crucial negotiation.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered social context, emotions, interaction. What about giving learners more say in the actual learning process, learner agency?
Yes, that's another really important piece. There's research looking specifically at what happens when you incorporate students' own beliefs, their attitudes, their perceptions into the curriculum planning.
And what does that research find? Does it make a difference?
It seems to. Studies looked at the impact on performance, motivation, learning outcomes, and generally it's positive.
So letting students, say, suggest activities they think would be helpful or interesting.
Exactly. Giving them an opportunity to help construct the curriculum. It makes teachers into researchers, too, in a way.
How so?
By paying close attention to what gets students excited, what works, what doesn't, and using that feedback to constantly refine things.
What becomes more of a partnership?
Precisely. And learners' own beliefs about language learning, what they think works, what they think is important, that really influences their productivity, the strategies they use, their whole attitude.
This seems to tie back to the sociocultural approach again and the ZPD.
It does. Students and teachers collaboratively creating meaning through interaction.
And one source mentioned post-method pedagogy. What's that about?
It's basically this idea that there's no single best method for teaching languages. Instead, the focus shifts firmly to the learner, and the teacher's role expands beyond just linguistic development to also include social empowerment through language, helping learners find their voice.
Right. And part of this is bi-directional understanding of input.
Yeah, love that term. It means input isn't just flowing from the teacher to the student. It's also about taking in student-suggested content and, crucially, taking in their feedback on activities to make future learning better.
A feedback loop.
Exactly. A continuous cycle driven by learner needs and interests.
Now, thinking about broader social factors.
Yeah.
How do things like ethnicity or immigrant status play into this identity negotiation?
That's a critical area. Buchholz and Hall point out that often the languages of dominant ethnic groups get positioned as somehow better or more important than minority languages.
Which can lead to negative feelings for minority language speakers.
Absolutely. Feelings of disrespect, marginalization. It's a real challenge.
And McKay and Wong noted that learners are kind of juggling these identities while they're learning English. And unfortunately, having limited English or being an immigrant can sometimes be viewed by others as, like, a deficiency.
Yeah, it's a societal bias that learners often have to navigate, sadly.
We have that story, Jiho, the young immigrant child.
Yes, Jiho's story is powerful, full of spirit, worked incredibly hard.
But still felt really hurt and frustrated when he felt, despised or ignored because he was seen as different, as a minority.
Right. And those experiences, while difficult, also seem to shape his multilingual skills in positive ways, too. It's complex.
It really underscores the importance of diversity and acceptance, doesn't it?
Immensely. And the research also stresses the importance of individual effort, that strong will, in keeping heritage languages and cultures alive. That internal drive is key.
So ultimately, it seems like creating schools and communities that genuinely value linguistic and cultural diversity is absolutely essential.
Couldn't agree more. It supports not just the language learning itself, but positive identity formation for everyone involved.
Okay, let's zoom in on the emotional side again, and self-image. Language is central to who we are.
Deeply central.
Yeah.
As Lamas and Watt put it, it's not just a tool, it's part of our being.
And there's a distinction made between self-concept and identity.
Yes. Mercer explains self-concept as more of your individual cognitive understanding of yourself, who you think you are internally.
Okay.
Whereas identity is more relational, how you define yourself in relation to others in social contexts, how you present yourself.
Got it. Self versus social self, kind of.
Sort of, yeah. And theories reflect this. Durnyai's L2 motivational self system, for instance, really zooms in on the individual learner's perspective, their personal goals and visions for themselves as a language user.
While Gardner's earlier work linked motivation more to attitudes towards the L2 community.
Right. He saw learning a language as involving the acquisition of, quote, symbolic elements of another ethno-linguistic community, connecting with the group.
But Norton brings it back to the individual's agency, doesn't she?
She does, emphasizing that the learner isn't just passively shaped, but actively shapes their context, integrates new things, negotiates their own multifaceted identity.
We're active players in this.
Absolutely. And then you have these broader ecological approaches, ecolinguistics, complexity theory.
Okay, what do they add?
They help us see the bigger picture. Ecolinguistics looks at the interactions between a language and its whole environment, social, cultural, physical.
Mhm.
And complexity theory helps us understand how all these different levels, macro, like national policies, meso, the local community, micro, the individual, are all interconnected and influence each other in shaping multilingual identity.
Like ripples in a pond, affecting everything else.
Exactly. So your multilingual identity isn't just one thing. It's this ongoing construction you build in relation to actors and structures at all these levels.
It really is complex.
It is. And to make it even more concrete, let's look at some specific contexts, like Finland and England.
Okay, different language learning landscapes there.
Very different. In Finland, learning Swedish is a major focus. In England, well, the data shows a decline in students taking modern languages at GCSE level over the past couple of decades.
Right, I saw that graph. French, German, Spanish entries going down.
Yeah, so the value placed on language learning, or maybe the perceived need for it, seems different.
And the complex construction of multilingual identity study compared experiences in these places.
And France too, yes. Some interesting findings emerged.
Like what?
Well, in Finland, students seemed quite willing to claim a multilingual self. They felt pride in their language skills, but maybe a bit hesitant about their future fluency.
Okay, in England.
In England, it was varied. Some felt their L1 English actually got in the way of learning other languages.
Oh, interesting. Like, everyone speaks English anyway.
Possibly that attitude, yeah. But for others, being multilingual was seen as quite unusual, something that made them stand out individually. The emotional connection really differed.
And France.
Again, varied. Some students seemed to rely more on external motivation, like role models, and didn't strongly connect language learning to their core self-concept.
Right.
And others, who were actually bilingual from home, seemed reluctant to even acknowledge that as part of their identity, at least publicly.
Wow, that's quite a contrast.
It is. But one theme that did cut across the cases was this. Feeling proud of your language skills seemed linked to feeling proud of the effort of learning.
Okay, pride in proficiency linked to pride in the learning itself.
Yes. But interestingly, happiness in language learning seemed more connected to intrinsic engagement, just genuinely enjoying the process.
That makes sense. The joy of doing it, not just the result.
Exactly.
So wrapping up this amazing deep dive, it's crystal clear that learning a new language isn't just about grammar drills and vocab lists, is it?
Not even close. It's a really profound engagement with identity. It's constantly shaped by our social worlds, our emotions, our interactions, and importantly, our own agency in that journey.
Yeah. And as we've really unpacked today, your relationship with a new language or languages, it's unique to you. It's molded by this huge mix of factors, both inside you and out there in the world.
Absolutely.
So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to mull over is this. How does understanding all these dynamics, the social, the emotional, the interactional, how does that empower you in your own language learning adventure? And how might it shift the way you connect with different language communities knowing the complexities involved?
Good question.
Definitely something to reflect on your own experiences and all those different threads weaving together to create your unique multilingual self.